Welcome to the Money Podcast Show.
Welcome back to the Money Podcast Show.
We're your hosts, diving deep into financial topics.
And I'm so excited because today marks the very first episode of something truly special we've been cooking up just for you.
That's right, you're tuning into the brand new Money Podcast Bookshelf playlist. This is our dedicated space to dive deep, unpack, and frankly obsess over our favorite money investing and financial education books.
Yeah, really get into them.
Exactly. And because we believe financial well-being touches every part of life, we'll sprinkle in some self-development gems too. We know you're busy, so we've done the reading, highlighted the insights, and now we're here to share all the nuggets that stood out to us. Okay, so get this. Did you know one U.S. study found that 40% of all public companies, even established ones in the Russell 3000,
Wow, that many.
yeah, lost at least 70% of their value and never recovered. Yet the index still rose 73-fold.
That's incredible.
It's all about what the author of today's book calls the psychology of money.
That's right. Today we are taking on a book that has profoundly shifted how we both think about personal finance. The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. This isn't your typical finance textbook filled with complex formulas or, market predictions.
Not at all.
Instead, it argues that doing well with money has little to do with how smart you are and everything to do with how you behave.
Exactly. It's such a refreshing take because it steps away from the cold, hard math we usually associate with money and really digs into the human element, our emotions, our quirks, our biases. It's about understanding not just what to do, but what happens in your head when you try to do it. The book is just full of these short, engaging stories that illustrate these powerful soft skills, which are, frankly, greatly underappreciated.
So crucial because money is everywhere, affects everyone, and confuses most of us. It offers lessons that apply to so many areas of life: risk, confidence, happiness. Housel argues that finance is often taught too much like physics, with rigid rules, and not enough like psychology with all its nuance. And that, in my view, is what makes this book an essential read, or in this case, a fantastic listen, for everyone looking to make better financial decisions, whether you're Ronald Read or Richard Fuscone.
Right, the janitor versus the exec. We'll get to them. Last time, we talked a lot about the importance of consistent habits for long-term growth, whether it was in fitness or career development.
Yeah, that consistency piece.
But here's a surprising thought from today's book. What if the biggest secret to building massive wealth isn't about being the smartest investor or finding the hottest new thing, but something far simpler and perhaps a bit counterintuitive?
Okay.
What if it's less about doing more and more about just enduring?
Enduring. Okay, so Housel starts right out of the gate by challenging our assumptions about what drives financial success. He shares this wild story about a tech executive, a genius who designed a key component in Wi-Fi routers in his 20s, started and sold multiple companies, wildly successful.
Oh, I remember that. The one who carried bricks of hundreds, bragged loudly about his wealth, and then, get this, tossed $1,000 gold coins into the ocean, skipping them like rocks, just for fun.
It's insane, right?
And then, days later, he shattered a $500 lamp at the hotel, pulled out $5,000, threw it at the manager, and told him to get out of his face. You can't make this stuff up.
Yeah.
His relationship with money was this mix of insecurity and just childish stupidity.
You really can't. And the kicker, years later, the genius went broke.
Went broke. Amazing.
He contrasts this with Ronald James Read, a janitor and gas station attendant from rural Vermont. First in his family to graduate high school, hitchhiked to campus every day.
Wow.
He fixed cars for 25 years, swept floors for 17, bought a $12,000 house, lived there his whole life. His main hobby was chopping firewood.
Sounds pretty simple.
Yep.
And then he died in 2014 at 92. And the humble janitor made international headlines. He had over $8 million.
$8 million.
He left $2 million to his stepkids and $6 million to his local hospital and library. People were baffled. Where did he get it? No lottery, no inheritance.
Right.
He just saved what little he could and invested in blue chip stocks, then waited for decades as tiny savings compounded into a fortune.
That's it. Janitor to philanthropist. He then parallels this with a Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive, Richard Fuscone, who retired in his 40s to become a philanthropist, praised for business savvy and integrity, lauded by the CEO.
Had it all, seemingly.
But just 5 months before Ronald Read died, Fuscone's Greenwich mansion, where guests would dance atop a see-through covering on an indoor pool, was sold in foreclosure for 75% less than it was worth.
Oh, that contrast really highlights how unique finance is. In what other field does someone with no formal training massively outperform someone with the best education and connections?
Exactly.
You'd never see a janitor doing a heart transplant better than a Harvard surgeon. It's because financial success isn't a hard science. It's a soft skill, driven by behavior, not just knowledge. Temperament over intelligence, almost.
This leads into another core idea. Everyone has their own unique experiences with money, and what you've experienced is far more compelling than what you learned secondhand.
Oh, definitely.
This anchors our views about how money works, and these views can vary wildly from person to person.
It's why what seems crazy to you might make total sense to me. Like, someone who grew up in poverty thinks about risk and reward in ways a child of a wealthy banker can't even imagine.
Right, totally different perspectives.
Or someone who lived through high inflation years will view bonds totally differently than someone who only experienced stable prices. It's not about smarts, it's just the luck of the draw, when and where you grew up.
The book cites a study by economists Ulrich Malmendier and Stefan Nagel, who found that people's lifetime investment decisions are heavily anchored to their own generational experiences, especially those early in adult life.
Makes sense.
If you grew up during a strong stock market, you're more likely to invest in stocks later. If inflation was high, you invest less in bonds. It's not about intelligence, just the dumb luck of when and where you were born.
It's fascinating. The S&P 500 increased almost tenfold, adjusted for inflation, for someone born in 1970 during their teens and 20s.
Huge growth.
But for someone born in 1950, the market went literally nowhere during those formative years. So two completely different lenses on how the stock market works. And Housel makes the crucial point that no amount of studying or open-mindedness can truly recreate the power of fear and uncertainty.
You can't simulate that feeling.
You don't have the emotional scars until you've lived through it. Like Kennedy learning about the Depression by reading about it versus someone who actually lost everything. Very different.
And this helps explain why people make seemingly irrational decisions, like buying lottery tickets. Americans spend more on them than movies, video games, music, sporting events, and books combined.
That stat is wild.
And it's mostly poor people. The lowest income households spend $412 a year, 4 times the amount of the highest income groups, often the same people who can't come up with $400 in an emergency.
It seems crazy to us, right? But the book gives a powerful perspective. Buying a lottery ticket is the only time in our lives we can hold a tangible dream of getting the good stuff that you already have and take for granted. We are paying for a dream, and you may not understand that because you are already living a dream. It makes you pause. It's not purely a spreadsheet decision. It's shaped by unique experiences and deeply personal stories. It's about hope, maybe.
Yeah, a different kind of calculation. So another important point that often goes overlooked is how new many modern financial concepts truly are. We act like we've had centuries of experience, but many of the bedrock ideas of personal finance are practically infants.
This is so true. The entire concept of being entitled to retirement is, at most, 2 generations old. Before WWII, most Americans worked until they died.
Right, that was the norm.
Social Security was only a tiny benefit initially. The first check was like, what, $22?
Yeah, tiny, even adjusted.
And the 401k, the backbone of American retirement savings, didn't even exist until 1978. The Roth IRA was born in 1998, barely old enough to drink.
It's no surprise many of us are bad at saving and investing for retirement. We're all just newbies.
We're all figuring it out.
The same applies to college. The share of Americans with a bachelor's degree has skyrocketed since 1940, and tuition has risen over 4-fold adjusted for inflation. We're winging it. Index funds are less than 50 years old. Even widespread consumer debt didn't take off until after WWII.
Dogs were domesticated 10,000 years ago and still retain wild behaviors.
Right.
We've had 20 to 50 years with our modern financial system, and we expect to be perfectly acclimated.
Good point.
It's a problem, and it helps explain why we don't always do what we're supposed to with money. We're all relatively new to this game, and what looks crazy to one person might make perfect sense to another, based on their limited but persuasive experiences.
This brings us to a huge, often uncomfortable truth. Luck and risk are siblings. They are both the reality that every outcome in life is guided by forces other than individual effort.
The flip sides of the same coin.
As Scott Galloway says, nothing is as good or as bad as it seems.
And the Bill Gates story illustrates this perfectly. He went to one of the only high schools in the world that had a computer in 1968.
Lakeside.
Yeah, Lakeside. Thanks to a forward-looking teacher and the Mothers Club. Most universities didn't have a computer as advanced. 1 in a million high school-age students attended a school with that kind of access. Bill Gates happened to be one of them. That's 1 in a million luck.
But then, the story of Ken Evans. He was a third member of that computer prodigy group at Lakeside, Gates' best friend. Just as skilled and ambitious. Gates believed they would have kept working together, gone to college together, maybe founded Microsoft with Allen.
Wow, really?
But Kent died in a mountaineering accident before graduating high school, a roughly 1 in a million risk.
Oh, that's tragic. So Bill Gates experienced 1 in a million luck, and Kent Evans experienced 1 in a million risk. The same force, same magnitude, opposite directions. It's why you can't believe in one without respecting the other. When judging people's financial success, your own included, it's never as good or as bad as it seems. We want to attribute success purely to effort, but luck plays a massive, often invisible role.
The book also gives examples like Cornelius Vanderbilt, who built his railroad empire breaking laws.
Yeah, pushing the boundaries.
Or John D. Rockefeller, whose circumvention of the law is often portrayed as cunning business smarts. These actions, which led to immense success, could have easily led to ruin. The line between bold and reckless is often a millimeter thick, only visible with hindsight.
That's the real challenge. If we don't give luck and risk their proper billing, we misattribute success and failure. Trying to emulate someone like Warren Buffett, who has extreme results, is hard because the role of luck in his lifetime performance is very likely high.
You can't copy luck.
Right. Instead, we should look for broad patterns of success and failure. Like people with control over their time tend to be happier. That's a pattern you can aim for.
John Bogle, the Vanguard founder, once shared a story from Kurt Vonnegut. At a party, Vonnegut tells Joseph Heller that their billionaire host made more money in a day than Heller did from Catch-22 in its whole history.
Wow.
Heller responded, "Yes, but I have something he will never have. Enough."
Enough, such a powerful word. And Housel shows us the terrifying flip side of not having enough with Rajat Gupta. Orphaned as a teenager, he became CEO of McKinsey, worth $100 million by 2008, an unfathomable sum.
Incredible success.
But he wanted to be a billionaire. He traded insider tips on Goldman Sachs' Warren Buffett deal, making a quick million, and other tips led to $17 million in profits.
Yet he already had unimaginable wealth, prestige, power, and freedom, and he threw it all away because he wanted more. Both Gupta and Bernie Madoff, who swindled investors for decades, went to prison. They had no sense of enough.
It's just plain foolish, as Warren Buffett said about long-term capital management. A hedge fund staffed by multimillionaires who lost everything by taking too much risk in the quest for more. To make money they didn't have and didn't need, they risked what they did have and did need.
That says it all.
The hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. If expectations rise with results, you'll never feel satisfied. Happiness is results minus expectations, right?
Mm-hmm. This is where social comparison becomes a huge problem. We look at a rookie baseball player earning $500,000 who seems rich, but he compares himself to Mike Trout making $430 million.
Right, there's always someone richer.
Trout compares himself to hedge fund managers making $340 million, and they look to Jeff Bezos, whose net worth increased by $24 billion in a year.
Yeah.
The ceiling of social comparison is so high, virtually no one will ever hit it.
The only way to win that game is to not fight it at all. Like the Las Vegas dealer's advice for winning. The only way to win in a Las Vegas casino is to exit as soon as you enter.
Good advice.
Enough isn't about being conservative. It's about realizing that an insatiable appetite for more will push you to the point of regret. Your reputation, freedom, family, friends, happiness, these are invaluable. Knowing when you have enough is your best shot at keeping them.
So connecting back to our hook, Housel delves into the truly mind-bending power of compounding. The story of ice ages is a great example. Small orbital changes over tens of thousands of years lead to massive ice sheets covering the Earth.
Right, tiny changes, huge effects over time.
It's not about tremendous force, but about consistent, tiny growth fueling future growth.
And that's exactly how it works with money, especially with Warren Buffett's fortune. We pour over 2,000 books on how he built his wealth, but few pay enough attention to the simplest fact. He's been a good investor since he was literally a child.
Since he was 10.
His net worth is $84.5 billion, but $84.2 billion of that was accumulated after his 50th birthday. $81.5 billion after he qualified for Social Security in his mid-60s.
That's staggering. His skill is adapting, but his secret is time. If he started at 30 with $25,000 and retired at 60, even with his phenomenal 22% annual returns, he'd have $11.9 million today. That's 99.9% less than his actual net worth.
Mind-blowing difference.
Mm.
Or compare him to Jim Simons of Renaissance Technologies, who compounds at an astounding 66% annually since 1988.
Way higher returns.
Simons is worth $21 billion, but that's 75% less than Buffett. Why? Because Simons didn't find his stride until age 50, less than half the time to compound.
These are ridiculous numbers, obviously, but they show how small changes in growth assumptions lead to impractical numbers. It's why the most powerful and important book about money should be called Shut Up and Wait.
I'd read that one-page book.
It would just be one page with a long-term chart of economic growth. Our brains are wired for linear thinking, not exponential. It's why Bill Gates wondered why anyone would need a gigabyte of storage when Gmail launched. His mentality was anchored in an old paradigm.
The practical takeaway here is that good investing isn't about earning the highest returns, which tend to be unrepeatable one-off hits. It's about earning pretty good returns that you can stick with for the longest period of time. That's when compounding truly runs wild.
Endurance again.
Exactly. So while there are a million ways to get wealthy, there's really only one way to stay wealthy. A combination of frugality and paranoia. This is a topic we don't talk about enough.
Definitely not. And Housel gives us another captivating story to illustrate this, comparing Jesse Livermore and Abraham Jermansky during the 1929 stock market crash. Livermore, the greatest stock market trader of his day, was short the market and made the equivalent of over $3 billion in one day.
$3 billion in a day.
His family was in tears, thinking they were ruined, and he had to tell them, "No, darling, I have just had my best ever trading day."
Meanwhile, Abraham Jermansky, a multi-millionaire real estate developer who bet heavily on surging stocks, was so ruined that he went missing and was seen tearing ticker tape into bits on Wall Street. Just tragic. 4 years later, Livermore, overflowing with confidence, made larger and larger bets, lost everything, went broke and ashamed, and eventually took his own life.
Both were great at getting wealthy, but equally bad at staying wealthy. The lesson for everyone, regardless of income, is that getting money requires taking risks, optimism, and putting yourself out there.
Sure.
But keeping money requires the opposite. Humility and fear that what you've made can be taken away just as fast. It requires frugality and accepting that some success is luck.
Michael Moritz, the billionaire head of Sequoia Capital, was asked why his firm was so successful for 4 decades. He said, "I think we've always been afraid of going out of business. We can't afford to rest on our laurels. It's survival."
Survival, not just growth.
Not growth or brains. The ability to stick around for a long time without wiping out is what makes the biggest difference.
Warren Buffett is a prime example. He didn't get carried away with debt, didn't panic and sell during 14 recessions, didn't sully his reputation, didn't attach himself to one strategy, didn't rely on others' money, and didn't burn out or quit. He survived. Survival gave him longevity, and longevity is what made compounding work wonders.
The story of Rick Guerin, the third member of Buffett and Munger's early investing group, really drives this home. He was just as smart as them, but he was in a hurry. During the 1973-74 downturn, he was heavily leveraged, got margin calls, and was forced to sell his Berkshire stock at under $40 apiece to Warren.
Ouch.
He was equally skilled at getting wealthy, but he lacked the skill of staying wealthy.
Nassim Taleb says, having an edge and surviving are two different things. The first requires the second. You need to avoid ruin at all costs. This survival mindset means prioritizing being financially unbreakable. If you're unbreakable, you're around long enough for compounding to work.
Planning is important, but the most important part of every plan is to plan on the plan not going according to plan. Think about 9/11, the housing bust, the financial crisis, a global pandemic. None of these were foreseen. A good plan embraces uncertainty with room for error or a margin of safety.
It's not about being conservative.
No. It's about raising the odds of success at a given level of risk by increasing your chances of survival. The more things you need to go right, the more fragile your plan.
And finally, cultivating a barbelled personality, optimistic about the future, but paranoid about what will prevent you from getting there, is vital. You can be optimistic that the long-term trajectory is up, but equally sure that the road is filled with landmines.
Progress and destruction coexist.
Destruction in the face of progress is not only possible, but normal. Our standard of living increased 20-fold over 170 years, but barely a day went by without reasons for pessimism. This mindset, though hard to maintain, is critical for financial endurance.
Here's another irony. Wealth is what you don't see. When you see someone driving a Ferrari, you think, wow, they're rich. But as a valet, Housel learned many were mediocre successes who spent a huge percentage of their paycheck on the car.
Right, the image versus reality.
He tells the story of Roger, who drove a Porsche that was later repossessed because he defaulted on the loan.
That's so telling. We tend to judge wealth by outward appearances, cars, homes, Instagram photos. Modern capitalism helps people fake it until they make it. But the truth is, wealth is what you don't see. It's the nice cars not purchased, the diamonds not bought, the clothes forgone. It's financial assets not yet converted into stuff.
Rihanna, the singer, nearly went bankrupt after overspending. Her advisors retort, was it really necessary to tell her that if you spend money on things, you will end up with the things and not the money? Is a great, if frustrating, example.
Huh, so blunt.
Most people, deep down, want to be wealthy. They want freedom and flexibility. But we're so conditioned to think having money means spending money that we miss the restraint it takes to actually be wealthy.
The analogy to diet and exercise is perfect. Exercise is like being rich, you put in the work, and you think you deserve a big meal. Wealth is turning down that treat meal and actually burning net calories. It's hard, requires self-control, but creates a gap between what you could do and what you choose to do, which accrues over time.
This leads to a huge insight. Building wealth has little to do with your income or investment returns, and a lot to do with your savings rate.
The savings rate, okay.
The U.S. uses 60% less energy per dollar of GDP today than in 1950. Not just because we found more oil, but because we built more energy-efficient cars and factories. We grew energy wealth by decreasing what we needed.
Wealth is just the accumulated leftovers after you spend what you take in. You can build wealth without a high income, but you have no chance without a high savings rate. Learning to be happy with less money creates a gap between what you have and what you want, similar to a growing paycheck, but easier and more in your control.
Past a certain income level, what you need is just what sits below your ego. Spending beyond a pretty low level of materialism is mostly a reflection of ego approaching income.
Interesting way to put it.
One of the most powerful ways to increase your savings isn't to raise your income, it's to raise your humility. People with enduring financial success tend not to give a damn what others think of them.
And you don't need a specific reason to save. Saving is a hedge against life's inevitable ability to surprise the hell out of you at the worst possible moment.
The unexpected.
Savings without a spending goal gives you options, flexibility, the ability to wait, and time to think. It's control over your time, which the book calls the highest dividend money pays. It's an unseen return, incalculable but profoundly valuable.
In a hyper-connected world where intelligence is hyper-competitive and many technical skills are automated, competitive advantages shift to nuanced and soft skills like communication, empathy, and flexibility.
Right, the human skills.
Yeah. If you have flexibility, you can wait for good opportunities, learn new skills, and find your niche at your own pace. This ability to control your time is becoming one of the most valuable currencies in the world.
Okay, so another profound lesson from the book is don't aim to be coldly rational when making financial decisions. Aim to be pretty reasonable.
Reasonable, not rational.
Reasonable is more realistic, and you have a better chance of sticking with it for the long run, which is what matters most.
This is illustrated by the bizarre story of Julius Wagner Jauregg, a 19th century psychiatrist who, in the early 1900s, actually tried to cure syphilis by injecting patients with malaria to induce a fever.
Injecting malaria? Seriously?
He won a Nobel Prize because it actually worked in some cases. He settled on a weak malaria strain that could be countered, but some patients still died from the treatment.
Fevers, it turns out, do play a role in fighting infection, but they hurt, and people don't want to hurt, even if it's rational for their body to have a fever. We treat fevers with drugs because it stops the pain, regardless of the science.
It's the same in finance. Harry Markowitz, the Nobel-winning economist who created modern portfolio theory, said he just diversified his own retirement savings simply across 50 stocks and bonds and didn't apply his complex theories.
He didn't use his own theory?
Nope. Why? Because his main goal was not to regret the future if the market went way up or way down. He wanted to be able to sleep at night. He wasn't rational, he was reasonable.
What looks like rational behavior can actually be a liability if it's so uncomfortable you can't stick with it. Housel argues that loving your investments, even if it seems emotional, can provide the endurance necessary to put the quantifiable odds of success in your favor.
Yeah, if that passion keeps you invested.
If you're passionate about a company, the inevitable downturns are blunted by feeling part of something meaningful.
There are other examples. Home bias in investing, where people prefer domestic stocks, isn't rational, but is reasonable if familiarity helps them stay invested.
Okay, that makes sense.
Day trading is not rational for most, but is reasonable in small amounts if it satisfies an itch and leaves diversified investments alone. Even making forecasts, while often terrible, is reasonable because it's human nature to want to know what's next. Jack Bogle, who crusaded for low-cost index funds, even invested some of his own money in his son's high-fee hedge fund. Life isn't always consistent, he said.
Stanford professor Scott Sagan once said, "Things that have never happened before happen all the time." This is a crucial idea because history, while valuable, is often used as an unassailable guide to the future in finance, which is a mistake.
It's the historians as prophets fallacy. Investing isn't a hard science like physics where electrons don't have feelings. Investors do have feelings.
Right.
The most important economic events of the future will be things history gives us little to no guide about. They'll be unprecedented. Like Feynman said, physics would be harder if electrons had feelings. Well, that's finance.
He highlights how a tiny fraction of people, like Hitler, Stalin, Gates, and events, WWII, 9/11 vaccines, were responsible for the majority of the world's direction and changes.
The tail events drive everything.
The impact of 9/11, for example, indirectly led to a housing bubble, financial crisis, and student loan debt surge. It's not intuitive to link 19 hijackers to $1.6 trillion in student loans, but that's the reality of a world driven by tail events.
The problem is we use past extreme events to guide our views of future worst-case scenarios. But those events had no precedent when they occurred. Like Fukushima, built for the worst-known earthquake, not something worse.
A failure of imagination.
The correct lesson from surprises is that the world is surprising, not that we should use past surprises as boundaries for the future. As Daniel Kahneman said, the world is difficult to anticipate.
History can also be misleading because it doesn't account for structural changes. The 401k and Roth IRA are new. Venture capital barely existed 25 years ago. The composition of the S&P 500 has changed dramatically, with technology stocks now a huge part. Even the time between recessions has shifted.
This is why Benjamin Graham, the father of value investing, constantly discarded and updated his own formulas in The Intelligent Investor. He was wildly successful, but his published how-to guides often don't work today because he was a pragmatist. He adapted.
Right. The world changed.
If his formulas were updated 5 times between 1934 and 1972, how relevant are they in 2025? Not very. The further back you look in investing history, the more likely you are to be examining a world that no longer applies today. Recent history is often a better guide.
So how do we navigate this unpredictable world? Housel points to a small group of blackjack players who practice card counting. They know they're playing a game of odds, not certainties. They bet more when odds are in their favor, but they never bet every chip.
Never go all in.
They have a rule of thumb to have at least 100 basic units of money to withstand bad swings.
That's room for error. It's acknowledging that uncertainty, randomness, and chance are an ever-present part of life. Benjamin Graham called it margin of safety, and his favorite summary was that the purpose of the margin of safety is to render the forecast unnecessary.
That's powerful. Room for error is the only effective way to navigate a world governed by odds, not certainties.
It's hard to overstate the power of that simple statement. Room for error is the only effective way to navigate a world governed by odds, not certainties. We underestimate the need for it. Analysts give price targets, not ranges. Pundits speak in certainties.
Yeah, false certainty.
But when it comes to our own home renovations, we estimate on budget, even though everyone knows they run over.
We avoid room for error because we think someone must know the future and we don't want to miss out. But room for error isn't conservative. It's about increasing your chances of survival. The biggest gains occur infrequently over long periods. So having cash, which might earn 1% in a bull market, actually generates a massive return if it prevents you from selling your stocks during a bear market.
Bill Gates understood this, building Microsoft with enough cash to pay a year's payroll, even with no income. Warren Buffett keeps ample cash because he won't trade a night's sleep for extra profits.
That barbell approach again.
It's about being barbelled, taking risks with one portion of your money and being terrified with the other to ensure you can remain standing.
This also ties into the concept of optimism bias in risk-taking, or Russian roulette should statistically work syndrome. You have to take risks to get ahead, but no risk that can wipe you out is ever worth taking. The odds are in your favor in Russian roulette, but the downside is unacceptable. Leverage, or debt, often pushes routine risks into ruinous ones.
And finally, room for error protects you from things you'd never imagine, like German tanks in WWII defeated by field mice eating the electrical insulation.
Field mice.
Or the unexpected things CEOs face, like water pipes breaking, offices being robbed, mental breakdowns. You can't prepare for what you can't envision. So, avoid single points of failure. Don't rely solely on a paycheck. save for things you can't predict, the financial equivalent of field mice.
Housel shares a conversation with a doctor friend who, despite achieving his lifelong dream against all odds, now says, "Awful career, man," due to stress and hours. This highlights a fundamental psychological underpinning. People are poor forecasters of their future selves.
Exactly. Imagining a goal is easy, but imagining it in the context of realistic life stresses that grow with competitive pursuits is different. This is called the end of history illusion. We know we've changed a lot in the past, but we underestimate how much our personalities, desires, and goals will change in the future.
We think we're done changing.
Right. We assume futures wants what current ass wants. Rarely true.
This has a big impact on long-term financial planning. Charlie Munger says the first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily. But how do you not interrupt a money plan when what you want out of life changes? Our money has perhaps 4 distinct 20-year blocks, not one continuous 80-year lifespan.
It means avoiding the extreme ends of financial planning. Assuming you'll be happy with a very low income or working endless hours for a high one increases the odds of future regret. Balance in savings, free time, commute, and family time encourages endurance.
And we should embrace changing our minds. Many miserable workers stay in careers only because it's what they picked at 18. When you accept the end of history illusion, you realize the odds of picking a lifelong job as a teenager are low.
So low.
We shouldn't let sunk costs anchoring decisions to past efforts trap our future selves. As Daniel Kahneman's colleague said, "I have no sunk costs" when discarding an entire draft of a book.
Wow, that takes discipline. So if a financial goal or plan made by a different you no longer serves your current self, abandon it without mercy. The quicker you do it, the sooner you can get back to compounding in a direction that truly aligns with who you are now.
Everything has a price. And with money, the key is figuring out what that price is and being willing to pay it. The S&P 500 increased 119-fold in 50 years, looking easy on paper. But the price of that success was volatility, fear, doubt, uncertainty, and regret.
Also shows how Netflix and Monster Beverage, 2 of the highest returning stocks, traded below their previous all-time high on 94% and 95% of days, respectively.
Almost always underwater from the peak.
The price of big returns is a never-ending taunt from the market.
Many try to get the returns without paying the price. They trade in and out, trying to sell before recessions and buy before booms. But as a Morningstar study showed on tactical mutual funds, few actually beat a simple buy and hold strategy. Individual investors who try to time the market often underperform the very funds they invest in.
The irony is, by trying to avoid the price, investors often end up paying double. Jack Welch, the former GE CEO, was famous for hitting quarterly earnings by massaging the numbers, effectively shielding shareholders from the price of business realities. But the bill came due later, with GE stock plummeting.
Right. The short-term gain led to long-term pain.
The penny gains of Welch's era became dime losses later.
Why do we try to avoid paying this price? Because the price of investing success isn't obvious. It's not a visible price tag. When your wealth declines, it doesn't feel like a fee for something good. It feels like a fine for doing something wrong. And we try to avoid fines.
But thinking of market volatility as a fee rather than a fine is crucial, like a Disneyland ticket. It costs $100, but you get an awesome day.
Yeah.
You don't see it as a punishment, it's a worthwhile trade-off. Volatility is the cost of admission to get returns greater than low-fee parts like cash and bonds. You have to find the price, then be willing to pay it.
Bubbles ruin lives, and we keep repeating them. Why? Beyond greed, Housel argues it's often because investors innocently take cues from other investors who are playing a different game than they are.
This is key. How much should you pay for Google stock? It depends on your time horizon. A 30-year investor, a 10-year investor, a 1-year investor, or a day trader will all have a different rational price. When investors have different goals, prices that look ridiculous to one person can make sense to another.
Bubbles form when the momentum of short-term returns attracts enough money that the makeup of investors shifts from mostly long-term to mostly short-term. The dot-com bubble in the 1990s wasn't just irrational optimism. It was fueled by day traders who didn't care about long-term valuation, only short-term price movement.
And the housing bubble in the mid-2000s was the same. Paying $700,000 for a Florida-tract home makes no sense for a family to raise kids in for 10 years, but perfect sense for a flipper who plans to sell in a few months for a quick profit. The number of homes flipped rose 5-fold during the bubble.
So these weren't necessarily irrational decisions by all participants, but rational moves within the context of different short-term games. The damage happens when long-term investors start taking their cues from these short-term traders.
Right, they get sucked into the wrong game.
When Cisco stocks surged to an insane valuation, long-term investors bought in, thinking others knew something they didn't. They were playing a different game, and when paths collide, someone gets hurt.
This applies to consumer spending, too. So much of it is socially driven, influenced by people we admire. A wealthy investment banker buys a big house, and a bank branch manager with a much lower income sees it and feels a subconscious entitlement to a similar lifestyle because their parents taught them Americans' lifestyles weren't that different. They take on huge debt to try and keep up, not realizing they're playing a different game.
The main takeaway: identify the game you're playing. Don't be swayed by people playing different games. Your time horizon and goals are unique. Define your own game.
Optimism, Housel argues, is the best bet for most people because the world tends to get better for most people most of the time. But pessimism holds a special place in our hearts. It sounds smarter, is intellectually captivating, and gets more attention.
He contrasts a shocking 2008 Wall Street Journal front-page story by a Russian professor predicting the U.S. would break into 6 pieces by 2010.
Which sounded plausible then.
With what an absurdly optimistic forecast for post-WWII Japan would have sounded like, even though that optimism actually came true over the next generation: massive economic growth, increased life expectancy, huge stock market returns.
Why is pessimism so seductive? Part of it is evolutionary. Loss aversion. Threats feel more urgent than opportunities. Money is also ubiquitous, so bad things affecting finances tend to affect everyone and grab attention. A stock market falling 1% is bolded in red, while a 1% rise is barely mentioned.
Another reason: pessimists often extrapolate present trends without accounting for how markets adapt. In 2008, an environmentalist predicted the world would run out of oil by 2030 based on current consumption rates. But new technologies like fracking exploded, and U.S. oil production tripled by 2019. Problems correct, and people adapt.
And finally, progress happens too slowly to notice, but setbacks happen too quickly to ignore. There are rarely overnight miracles, but many overnight tragedies. The Wright brothers' flight in 1903 went largely unnoticed for years, while a plane crash in 1908 garnered immediate attention.
Growth is driven by compounding, which takes time. Destruction is from single points of failure, which happen in seconds, or loss of confidence, which is instant. A 70% decline in heart disease death rate since 1965, saving 500,000 American lives annually, gets less attention than quick, sudden losses like terrorism or plane crashes.
The short sting of pessimism often prevails, while the powerful pull of optimism goes unnoticed. Stephen Hawking, who became paralyzed at 21, said his expectations were reduced to 0, and everything since then has been a bonus. Expecting things to be bad is often the best way to be pleasantly surprised when they're not.
The 2008 financial crisis saw U.S. households lose $16 trillion, 10 million more Americans unemployed, and the stock market halved. But if an alien visited Times Square in 2007 and 2009, they'd see the same cities, factories, knowledge, tools, and ideas. What changed? The stories we told ourselves about the economy.
That's it. In 2007, we believed in housing stability and prudent bankers. In 2009, that story broke. Narrative damage. It's one of the most potent economic forces. At a personal level, we often believe stories that we desperately want to be true, especially when we face limited control and high stakes. Household calls these appealing fictions.
He shares a chilling example of a Yemeni father whose son was sick. Village elders proposed a folk remedy, burning a stick through his son's chest to drain sickness. The father said, "When you have no money and your son is sick, you'll believe anything." This explains why people listen to TV investment commentary with little track record or fall for Ponzi schemes like Bernie Madoff's.
We form complete narratives to fill in the gaps of what we don't know, creating an illusion that the world is understandable. This can lead to overconfidence. If you think a recession is coming and cash out stocks, your view will be warped by what you want to happen. Incentives influence our financial outlooks.
This is why room for error, flexibility, and financial independence are indispensable. The bigger the gap between what you want to be true and what you need to be true for an acceptable outcome, the more you protect yourself from appealing financial fictions. We all have an incomplete view of the world, but we need to tell ourselves a story that makes sense.
Housel caps the book with actionable lessons, but stresses he can't tell you what to do because he doesn't know your unique circumstances, your goals, or your values. Just like a modern doctor lays out options and lets the patient decide. But there are universal truths.
First, find humility when things go right and compassion when they go wrong. It's never as good or as bad as it looks, and luck and risk are real.
Second, less ego, more wealth. Wealth is what you don't see. created by suppressing what you could buy today for more options in the future.
Third, manage money in a way that helps you sleep at night. That's your best universal guidepost, regardless of maximizing returns.
Fourth, increase your time horizon. Time is the most powerful force in investing. It makes little things grow big and big mistakes fade away.
Fifth, become okay with a lot of things going wrong. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune because a small minority of things account for the majority of outcomes.
Sixth, use money to gain control over your time. It's the highest dividend wealth pays and a universal driver of happiness.
Seventh, be nicer and less flashy. Humility, kindness, and empathy bring more respect than possessions.
Eighth, just save. Save for saving's sake. It's a hedge against life's inevitable surprises and gives you incredible, incalculable flexibility.
Ninth, define the cost of success and be ready to pay it. Volatility, fear, doubt are fees, not fines.
10th, worship room for error. It gives you endurance, which makes compounding magic over time.
11th, avoid financial extremes. Your goals change, and balance helps you avoid future regret.
12th, like risk because it pays off over time, but be paranoid of ruinous risk that prevents you from future risks.
13th, define the game you're playing, and don't be influenced by others playing a different game.
And finally, respect the mess. Smart, reasonable people can disagree in finance. There is no single right answer, just the answer that works for you.
What an episode. The psychology of money truly challenges conventional wisdom and offers such invaluable human-centric insights. We hope this deep dive into Morgan Housel's brilliant work has given you plenty to think about. He even shares how his family applies these lessons.
Right, like keeping a higher percentage in cash than you'd expect. Around 20% outside the house.
Yeah, which on paper seems indefensible for maximizing returns, but it works for them.
He sees cash as the oxygen of independence, ensuring they're never forced to sell stocks.
Right.
It's their margin of safety. And they live considerably below their means, having kept their lifestyle desires from moving much since their 20s, despite rising incomes.
That takes discipline. For investments, he's shifted from stock picking to dollar-cost averaging into low-cost index funds.
Just steady, consistent investing.
Not because stock picking is bad, but because with a high savings rate and frugal lifestyle, he can meet all his goals without the added risk of trying to outperform the market. His strategy relies on a high savings rate, patience, and optimism in global economic growth.
This all comes back to a core idea that Housel emphasizes. You have to find what works for you. Good decisions aren't always rational. Sometimes you have to choose between being happy and being right. His family owns their house outright without a mortgage.
Which he calls the worst financial decision on paper.
But the best money decision because it gives him an independent feeling.
It's really about finding the mastery of the psychology of money, what allows you to sleep well at night. And for him, that's independence. For you, our listener, it might be something different. What's that unseen return your money gives you?
It's amazing how much of our financial well-being comes down to understanding ourselves, isn't it? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Which idea from today's episode resonated with you the most? Or what's the last book that flipped your money mindset? DM us or drop your thoughts in the comments below.
And speaking of comments, we're always on the lookout for the next book to unpack on our bookshelf playlist. So if there's a financial or self-development book you'd love us to discuss next, let us know. We'll pick one randomly and dive into it here.
Make sure you follow us on our social media pages to keep up with announcements about our next episode and all things money podcast.
So until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep those insights flowing. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this episode if you found it valuable.
We'll catch you next time on the Money Podcast.